So quick review, we've looked at what do the cells look like, what's inside of a cell, how big is a cell, and we dived inside the nucleus and started looking at the DNA, the instructions for a cell, and what tells the cell exactly what it's supposed to do and how and when. So now we're going to look at how do we get more of those same cells with the same DNA so that the entire organism can end up with all the same instructions. And we call that process cell division. So when we look at a cell, there's a life cycle of every single cell. And that life cycle goes through three phases. So growth, and then copying the genetic material, the DNA, and then actually dividing. As the cell goes through these three phases, the cell is doing its normal jobs. Most of that is happening during the growth cycle. So while it's growing, it's being a skin cell or being a nerve cell and sending messages. It might be a bone cell providing structure. But when the DNA says, okay, it's time for you to copy and make new bone cells or make new skin cells, it doubles the DNA and then divides the cell to make a new cell. So that's going to be our focus of this flip, is how does that happen and exactly why does that happen? So there's two types of cell division. One of them is mitosis. I like to remember this by saying mitosis happens in mitoses. It happens in your body cells. And if I think about my toes, they have bone and muscle and skin and nerves. So it has all the different types of cells that you would find throughout your body. So mitosis happens in your body cells, all the things that you would find in your toes. What happens through mitosis is, the technical definition is, it's the division of body cells. And the end result is an identical cell to the original cell with 46 chromosomes. So you start with one cell that has 46 chromosomes and you end with two cells that look exactly the same that also have 46 chromosomes. The reasons that you would want the cell to go through this process is so that an organism could grow, so an organism can develop, so an organism can repair, or if I'm an organism that does asexual reproduction, so I can make no more organisms, so I can do asexual reproduction. So mitosis, I'm not going to go through all the phases of mitosis and exactly what happens, but ultimately you start with a parent cell, the DNA doubles, so now I have 92 chromosomes, and then the cell splits in half and creates two identical chromosome or cells, one with 46 chromosomes over here and one with 46 chromosomes over here. There is another type of cell division called meiosis, and this is the reproduction of, or the division of reproductive cells, so the creation of sperm and egg cells. The result of this is to end up with 4 new cells that have only 23 chromosomes, so half the number of chromosomes an original cell would have. And the main goal in this is to create cells that would be used for sexual reproduction, or create cells that would be used to make a unique new organism. We're not going to focus on this. You don't need to record anything about this one, but I do want you to know that it exists. Our main focus will be mitosis, the division of all your other body cells. So why is cell division important? It's important to different types of organisms for different reasons. If I am a unicellular organism like bacteria or protists, those little organisms we saw under the microscopes, I am going to use cell division in order to reproduce. If I can divide in two, then the second cell is going to be a new organism, a new protist or a new bacteria or a new fungus. So my main goal, if I'm doing cell division and I'm a unicellular organism, is reproduction. If I'm a multicellular organism, like a plant or an animal, then cell division is important for a whole bunch of reasons. So it's important to be able to grow, to get taller, to get stronger. it's important to be able to develop. If I'm a frog and my cells aren't dividing, I can't get legs or I can't get rid of my tail. Um, it's important for repair. If I get a cut, I need to be able to repair myself. And it's important for reproduction if I am making reproductive cells, and that was the meiosis that we discussed before. But in order to do that, we still need cell division. So let's dive in now to the details of why each different reason for cell division is important. So it's important for growth, focusing mostly on here multicellular organisms, that an organism can get bigger. So cells can only get so large. A skin cell can only get so big before it would not be able to function any longer. So in order for you to grow in size, the cells have to divide. You have to have more bone cells and more skin cells and more muscle cells than you had before. So aside from just growing, organisms also need to develop. So if I'm a multicellular organism, my cells need to have specific jobs. And in order for that to happen, I need to have cell division because I start as a single cell. Every single organism begins as a single cell and then goes through cell division. So my single cell divides into 2 and then 4 and then 8 and so on and so forth. But as the cells become bigger, they specialize. And so not all of my cells can do the same jobs. So thinking about a human, as my cells divide, they start to get the jobs of bone cells and stomach cells and muscle cells and nerve cells. So in order to do that, my cells must go through mitosis. And that allows for an organism to become more complex and more developed. Ultimately, the cells get their special jobs. The third reason that cell division is important is to repair. If you get hurt, if you get a cut, if you fall off your bike, if you break a bone, then that injury needs to be fixed. Otherwise, your body will start to have trouble surviving. And so in order to create new cells to take the place of the bone cells that were broken or the skin cells that were cut, they need to go through cell division. So it's important for repair to create new cells to replace the injured cells. And then in addition to that, cells get old. Just like people get old, your cells get old. So skin cells. Your skin cells don't last forever. They slough off your body and they need to be replaced. If they didn't replace, we'd have a whole bunch of people walking around without skin. That would be, 1, look really weird, but 2, you wouldn't have your skin, your layer of protection to help keep you safe from bacteria and other things that are on the outside world. So in order to keep that barrier, that protection from the outside world healthy, then cell division has to happen so that we can create new identical skin cells to replace the older cells that have died. And lastly, reproduction. So again, this is, as far as mitosis goes, this is important for unicellular organisms. And when we're looking at mitosis and unicellular organisms, when a single-celled organism splits and makes a new copy of itself, we now have 2 bacteria. So if this is an example of a bacteria cell, it's going to double and ultimately make 2 new cells. So now I have a baby bacteria that I didn't have before. If the cells couldn't do this, or if this is the protists that we were looking at under the microscope, if they were unable to go through mitosis or unable to split and make baby bacteria or baby protists, their species would go extinct. They wouldn't be able to survive. So what happens when cell division doesn't go quite right? It doesn't always happen perfectly, so cells don't always divide into exactly the way they're supposed to. And when that happens, we call it a mutation. So a mutation really is when that division happens, the DNA doesn't divide exactly the way it's supposed to and causes a change in the DNA. When we have a change in the DNA, that can result in a change to the organism's traits. It might be a change in a gene because of a change in the letters. If you think about the strand of DNA and those letters that are coding for a specific trait, it might change that trait, like the ability to roll your tongue. And if it's dividing incorrectly because of the number of chromosomes, then it can result again in a change in the characteristics or the traits of that organism. So we're not going to test on that right now, but that is something that's going to come back later on. And so you'll need to keep cell division in mind as we talk about what might happen and how those changes in traits become important to an organism and their species later on.